This is Sean Ferris recording his screencast for Milestone 7, or Week 4 of MGDT. There was only two major initial tasks planned originally for this week. They were all the polished items that have been added as the completed, as well as doing a final user testing of level 1 in the tutorial level. I was able to get to the world map, which was kind of a wish list item, so that ticket was created and finished. Most of the polished stuff was little fixes such as grammar and setting up Pixie's ability to cast a light when she has emotions, and set up the bat script to make the bats swarm after Pixie in level 1. Additionally, setting up the world map so that way there's a transition screen between levels and the player can pick and go back. So those will be the big features I'll be showing off this week. The rest are small, minute changes that'll be more difficult to highlight. Plan for next week is to do some polish on this main menu, changing the way the difficulty sets up and having some pop-up feedback. So going to the tutorial level, to the world map here, we can see that there's a layout of the path that the player will take, implying to the player that there's more levels in the future. The player can pick a level that they have completed to replay, such as the tutorial castle. The suggestion has been made to change it to say replay instead of begin. If they've already cleared the level, and I agree with that, that'll be a task for this coming week. When they're doing a level for the first time, it should say begin. They could turn speed run on and off in terms of speed tracking. The advice has been given to additionally on this screen be able to change your difficulty on a level, as well as to add some kind of indicator on the levels that lets the player know what difficulty they've already beaten a level on, and those are planned tasks for the coming week. So getting into level 1 so we can see the major changes we've done there. Oh, before I forget, the other suggested changes was getting rid of kind of the blue line and going with something a little more organic for the pathing, which I agree with. And to make the cloud that obscures the level a little smaller, so that way it's not blocking the entire screen as opposed to just a portion where the path would be, to allow the player to see kind of the pyramids and the mountain in the background to imply the coming story. So going into the level, we won't see substantial changes here. I noticed during testing for some of the students, or some of the testers, that the tutorial wizard was appearing slightly off the screen, so he'll be fixed this week in these levels. Just a matter of nudging his holder a little to the right, or to the left rather. So after the level environment changes here, we'll see our first big step, which was the added effect of making Pixie's lighting effects work. Originally when I was doing this test there was a slight delay, but I've managed to set it up now, that way she'll immediately change the color of the environment around her based off of her emotion, which gives a nice feedback. So moving forward into level 1, we'll be able to see some of the other changes I've made, such as the swarm for the bats. And in user testing I found that the bats have an error in their code where they will continue to chase the player even though they've gone invisible. So this week I'll be doing a test that sets up a distance check. That's what most of the enemies use. So that way when the bats get too far away from Pixie, they'll respawn. During a lot of my user testing, the bats were chasing players back to their spawn position, which is not what I wanted. Another quick thing to notice is that because I turned off speed level tracking here at the top, we don't have the speed running time. If I were to go back in and restart the game, hit continue, go to level 1 but turn speed running on, then we will see the timer at the top will actually have the count once the level begins. So here we go. This is what we already know what it looks like with speedrunning, but I just wanted to show that it can be toggled on and off. One of the users, actually the very first user, discovered that Pixie's jump button was working differently than it was in the tutorial level. He complained that it felt like Pixie was jumping on release, which turned out to be the case, and I think was responsible for some of Nick's points that it felt like in level 1 when he was trying to jump, it wasn't quite responding the way it was supposed to. So I looked at the two codes and discovered that the way that the button for level 1 was coded was on release as opposed to initial hit, so I changed that so a jump feels the same for both levels, and every tester after that for the rest of the week felt that they didn't have any problem jumping at that point. Based on Nick's input, I also increased, or decreased rather, the cooldown timing for the inversion of gravity. Before, Pixie was able to hit the opposite vertical distance, be at the ceiling or the floor, and there would be about a 1 second delay after she had done that before the button would appear again. Now it's timed perfectly, so that way just about when Pixie hits the other maximum vertical distance, she'll be able to flip again. I do not want her to be able to flip at any shorter distance than that, because it'll allow the player to basically abuse the flip to move horizontally through the level while flipping basically continually. The jump button was the big issue that players discovered during the testing. I got feedback that the fire basically looked like everything but fire. With that in mind, I've gone through two variations of trying to think of ways to visually explain the native illumination of the scene. Some people liked the lamps, but it wasn't necessarily the best choice. And then this fire pit, probably because of scale, has been kind of described as just not being clear. With that in mind, I think that I'm going to go ahead and remove just the fire source as a whole, as was suggested by Teresa initially. They don't necessarily need an explanation for these light sources. They can just be an ambient light involved in the scene. Some other big fixes that need to be done that haven't been done are primarily making sure that the illumination of sparkles behind the buttons that are supposed to be appearing are working properly. In the tutorial level, there's a nice sparkle effect, and I'll go to it so we can see it. It appears behind the buttons, but because the screen is scaling incorrectly, they aren't appearing behind the buttons on devices, so I need to change the way that they're set up. A lot of users also felt that moving between scenes, because sometimes there can be a load on the devices, that it's not always clear that the device is loading. Some of them think something is wrong, and I think that was the explanation for why the instructors felt that the skip button was unresponsive, was because it had gotten it on the first hit. It was just beginning to load the tutorial level. So what I'm going to do is insert either a holder scene in between each level that it'll be a quicker load, or just come up with a little animation prefab that goes onto every scene that appears once you hit application load, so that way there's some kind of animated event going on the screen that lets the player know that there's a loading between screens. So in a moment here we should see on the small screen the sparkle effect, and we don't because it's just not big enough, and this is part of the reason the sparkles, here we go. The sparkles aren't dynamically sizing with the screen size, so once I have these set up properly, the sparkles should appear behind items as they appear to help give that visual input to the player for the first time that they need to click those buttons during the tutorial level. So that really goes over the big changes. So we added in the world map, and I've done a bunch of small changes in terms of grammar fixes and timing. Moving into next week, I've isolated a couple of new issues based off of the feedback from the users or the instructors. So I'm working with Tom from the music department to come up with music for the world map as well as for the background scene, so it'll be timed a little better and move a little smoother. Additionally, there'll be new game polish tasks for the first week of the next class. I had noticed the jump issue because of player testing, and I went ahead and fixed that, but because it wasn't originally part of the plan for this week, I went ahead and put it into next week's code. I have a bunch of other little things to fix, such as adding the difficulty icons and their color for the buttons to give kind of a feedback of what hardness you're on, adding a little bit of a description menu for those difficulties. I've got adding the animations so that the players will know that the game is locked up between loads. Remove the fire from level 1, fix the bad AI so they'll stop chasing players once they're off screen. Another player mentioned that they would like to see a pop-up at the end of the level that tells them, kind of congratulations, you've completed the level, but also show them their speedrun time, because the way the level ends now with the tutorial event, or with the wizard event, is that it blocks out that speedrun timer, so you can't really see what time you completed it with. I think a lot of the polish that's left to do with those kind of pop-ups that in between scenes that let player know when the scenes are changing, or give them feedback about their progress on the level as a whole. I discussed that I'm going to add a way to add a visual cue to those level boxes to let you know the different levels of difficulty you've built it on. Oh, and one of the players noticed that once you beat level 1, level 2 unlocks, to kind of implicate that that's how the world map is going to open up. But it says that it's under development, which was my original intent, but I forgot to disable the begin button, so he naturally was trying to start the level even though I told him he couldn't play it. He suggested that I should just hide that button, and I agree. So those are the big steps that I'm going to take for next week. I think I've covered basically showing off the big changes for what I did this week. That's really it.